King Louis and Queen Mary returned from Prague in early 1523, on the demands of the Hungarian estates. The king had managed to secure some aid for the Ottoman border from the Bohemian Diet, but he had left Bohemia in much the same unstable state he found it in 1522. Upon their return to Buda, the monarch and consort found a developing financial and political catastrophe. The royal treasurer, Bishop Paul Varada of Veszprém, could not find the funds for the treasury. Confidence in the currency had plummeted because of the debasement measures of 1521, and foreign aid had been cut off. Archduke Ferdinand, Venice, and the papacy refused to transfer any money to the treasury, instead giving it directly to select fortresses and commanders. The papal nuncio, Baron Burgio, was under strict orders to give nothing to the royal treasury, as Rome believed that it would be squandered. The papacy also demanded that the now monk Paul Tomori, who had previously proven himself a capable warrior, who was zealous, popular with soldiers, who stayed out of court intrigue and could be trusted with money, be made the Archbishop of Kalosha and Captain General of the realm. The king and the estates agreed, and Tomori had to be, figuratively, dragged out of his monastery. At the Diet of 1523, the king faced calls to remove Palatine Báthory. The estates accused him of embezzling and counterfeiting 1 million florins and cooperating with Ottoman spies. The charges were absurd, but the anger was real. The estates were looking for someone to blame for the current state of affairs, and along with Báthory, anger was turned against the Lutherans and foreigners. Against the free royal cities with their populations of foreign German Lutherans, against the Fugger banking clan that owned several mines in Hungary, and against the Lutheran lioness herself, Queen Consort Mary von Habsburg. She had allegedly returned from Prague with luggage full of Lutheran pamphlets. It was also now claimed that the king was under malevolent influences. In its anger, the Diet pushed through anti-Lutheran measures, persecuting and burning what little Lutheran books and preachers there actually were in the realm. The king calmed tensions by dismissing Báthory as Palatine, but then reinstated him after the Diet dissolved. This of course made the estates angrier, and the following year of 1524, the Diet demanded the expulsion of all foreigners from the realm, including ambassadors, with the exception of the king's Bohemian courtiers. In its more lucid moments, the Diet quibbled over the inheritance of the lords of Ilok. Our old friend Lovro had passed away with no heirs. Another prominent figure to die in 1524 was George St. Mary, who was made Archbishop of Esztergom in 1523. As had happened after the death of Cardinal Bakac, the king attempted to seize the archbishop's treasures, only to find that St. Mary had not accumulated as much as his predecessor had. Soon after, St. Mary's protege, Chancellor Szalkai, was made the new primate of the realm. And during all of this internal upheaval, the border continued to collapse. In 1523, the castle of Ostrovice fell. Another campaign into Vlachia achieved nothing, and Archbishop Tomori won a Pyrrhic victory near Petrovaradin in August. The following year, Jajce, Klis, and Turnus Severin were besieged, and while Jajce held out and Klis was saved by a desperate charge out of the fortress, Turnus Severin fell. The Ottomans then demolished it and Orsova so that they couldn't be recaptured. Voivod Zápolya had been sent to relieve Turnus Severin, but he couldn't do it due to lack of soldiers and money. After the fortress fell, Zápolya and a few of his magnate supporters, allegedly, contemplated using what troops they did have to stage a coup, and force the king to oust Báthory and install a new royal council. However, at the time, the king just happened to have a lot of troops from Bohemia around him, who were on their way to the border, so nothing happened. At this time, King Louis was also communicating with the Shah of Persia, discussing a joint strategy against the Ottoman Sultan, as it was rumored that the Ottomans had suffered defeats in the east. But the distance between the two realms was too great to make any coordination possible. However, Louis made more realistic proposals for the recapture of Belgrade to his uncle King Sigismund of Poland-Lithuania and his brother-in-law Archduke Ferdinand. Sigismund advised his nephew to not pursue Belgrade, lest he suffer the fate of Vladislav of Varna, and Ferdinand said that he did not have troops to spare. His brother needed them for the war against that supporter of the Lutheran, that ally of the Turk, that king of the French, who was now diplomatically isolated and had, out of desperation, reached out to Emperor Charles's enemies. Ferdinand told Louis he'd only be able to spare more troops if the realm's coinage was fixed, so the soldiers could be paid, and then only if Louis could guarantee the defense of the Croatian section of the border in order to protect Austria. In the words of one historian, reforming the coinage was difficult. Croatia was impossible. The Croatian estates themselves were now dependent on either Ferdinand or Venice for aid, and were in frequent communication with both. The idea of ending the union with Hungary, as it was providing nothing, was being seriously considered. There was just no agreement on what to replace it with. The king, either aware of these sentiments or attempting to respond to Ferdinand's request, appointed his loyal courtier, John Tahi, as Koban to Ivan Karlovich. But this only made things worse, as it caused a crisis of leadership in Croatia. In August of 1524, the Croatian Diet demanded that the king appoint only one Ban, and if he didn't do so, they threatened negotiations with the Sultan. A threat which would have carried far more weight had it not been invoked many times over the last decade. The king himself had also overused it in his requests for aid abroad. Karlovich ended the crisis of leadership in Croatia by resigning in the autumn of 1524, and he was replaced by the king's childhood friend Ferenc Batani as the new Koban, until Tahi resigned a year later. Some members of the Croatian estates wrote to the Archduke to ask him to proclaim a new Ban. Some minor nobles also asked that it be someone who was not a Croatian magnate, as they feared the magnates were scheming to turn them all into peasants. But Ferdinand refused, as it would have amounted to usurping Croatia from his brother-in-law. Instead, he sent what aid he could and made deals with individual nobles. The Croatian magnate Nicholas Zrinski gave Ferdinand several of his fortresses and estates on the river Una for 2 years, to be manned by Ferdinand's soldiers and maintained with Ferdinand's money, while Zrinski would receive a salary as a cavalry commander. Ferdinand had also asked for the income from the Zrinski's silver mine at Gvozdansko, but King Louis put a stop to that part of the deal. As an aside, after the fall of Knin, the Diet of Dalmatia and Croatia was left without a traditional meeting place, and there would be attempts to have the Croatian and Slavonian diets sit together, if for no other reason than for the convenience of the office of the Ban of Dalmatia, Croatia, and Slavonia, who was supposed to preside over the diets. But the Slavonian estates refused. They wanted to protect their traditions and avoid a sudden influx of members with different interests and influences.